start off then with the Mazenodian family. And what I've got behind me then is the beginning of our constitutions and rules, the call of Jesus Christ heard within the church through people's need for salvation draws us together. That's what the Mazenodian family is all about. The full text, and that's why we are all here, because of this text. The call of Jesus Christ, heard within the church through people's need for salvation, draws us together as missionary oblates of Mary Immaculate. Christ thus invites us to follow him and to share in his mission through word and work. Cooperating with the Savior and imitating his example, we commit ourselves principally to evangelizing the poor. That's why we're here. Now, that is in our oblate constitutions and rules, but it describes the vocation of the whole Mazenodian family. So, why the word Mazenodian? People say to me, well, why aren't you talking about the oblate family? Well, that's what we used to talk about until we discovered that there are 83 different varieties of oblate families around the world. Just here in the United States, you've got the Oblates of St. Francis de Sales, the Oblates of the Virgin Mary, the Oblates of St. Martha, just 3 other oblate groups that I've come across. And therefore we use the word Mazenodian, because we are the only ones with that founder. It's interesting how people get confused, and I've even heard oblates saying this, the Macedonian family. And I have to say, excuse me, is our founder Eugene de Mazenod, or what? Okay, the Mazenodian family. And then why the word family? And that comes to us basically from Pope Francis. He's the one who has used this concept of the charismatic families. From Pope Benedict onwards, but Francis in particular. And a couple of years ago we had the Jubilee year for consecrated life. And Pope Francis wrote a letter to all the members of the religious congregations and invited them to participate fully in this year. And then there's a paragraph in that letter where he speaks to all the members of the charismatic families, all the lay people who are involved in some way with the charism of that. So that's the origin of the name Mazenodian family, why we have chosen those 2 words. All this is as a response to what makes us what we are. The call of Jesus Christ heard within the church through people's need for salvation. And this need for salvation is what has called for an ongoing and evolving response. Eugene de Mazenod himself, 1816, he founds one community, and his idea was only one community of diocesan priests to preach missions. Within 2 years, he understood that the call of Jesus Christ for people's need for salvation needed something wider. And so they decided on more than one community with Notre Dame du Law. And the diocesan priests then became religious in vows, exactly 200 years ago. And then it opened out. The need to respond to the calls of the poor, of the abandoned, led us to take over Marian sanctuaries. It led us then into the ministry of seminaries as part of our charism. And then in 1841, foreign missions, which had not been part of the original plan. And so throughout Eugene's life, and for the past 200 years, we have been responding to the call of Jesus Christ through people's need for salvation. In Eugene's own lifetime, there were 4 responses to the charism that he gave us. The first one, the Oblates of Mary Immaculate. And then the youth, the mission supporters, and the honorary oblates. 4 expressions of his charism during his own lifetime. So after the death of the founder from 1861 till 2018, what has been happening? How have we been responding to this ongoing call of Jesus Christ? And it is all part of the church. From 1861 to the present, if we look at how the church understanding of itself and of its membership has changed. At the time of the founder, we are familiar with the pyramid diagram for the church. The hierarchy with the laity. The hierarchy with the pope, the bishops, the priests, the religious, and at the bottom, the laity. And we also are aware of the concept of that triangle with the religious and the non-religious, the laity out there somewhere. Vatican II comes along and changes that pyramid into a circle. No longer the hierarchical model, but the circular model of the people of God with Lumen Gentium. And so the transformation is from priest, laity, religious in the pyramid to communion, with the key words of community, ministries, charism. One of the theologians reflecting on this has spoken about a new ecclesial ecosystem, from laity participating in the charism and mission to being in communion with the charism and the mission. So there is a conversion of categories. And the Oblate congregation has been part of this, and we've been reflecting on this. The same theologian who speaks about the ecosystem comes up with two interesting points, where he says this conversion will only happen when we learn a different way to breathe and nourish ourselves and relate with others. A different way of being in the church. And then whether or not they think alone of the new situation or they think about it together, we have to decide together what strategies to follow. We can look at that then from our point of view of being an apostolic religious congregation. Before the Vatican Council, we had the cloister versus the world. And you could say the religious give spiritual treasures, spiritual guidance, and the laity receive. And then on the other hand, you also have the other side of the picture, where the laity give material assistance and the religious receive it. So there was this give and take, but very much from a viewpoint of superiority. Today then we're looking at from cloister to world, from separation to communion. And we can think of some of the ways in which this has been happening. I think of the college where I was teaching in South Africa, where the laity came in as substitutes for the religious. We couldn't find a teacher in a particular subject, so we employed a lay person just to teach that subject, okay? As a substitute, because we didn't have a religious to take the person's place. And then slowly that started to evolve to the laity with some responsibility for that subject, but very much with the religious having to approve every single bit. And then that moved to laity with responsibility, but still always with the religious looking over and making the final decisions. And then the fourth step of that model is the laity as bearers of the charism. That together we are carrying that charism. Together we have that responsibility. And this theologian, Bottano, has this very lovely little expression. He says, from being satisfied with the crumbs to responsible participation in the banquet. That's what it's all about. And we used to dish out the crumbs very generously, but now it's let's sit at the same table at the banquet. And he also makes an interesting point where he says the strength of these charismatic families does not come from the dominant institution that pulls the others along in its wake, but of the communion between the various institutions and groups, all serving the same mission, that is enriched by the particular charisms of each group. Now, what is very important to note in all this is that when the Vatican Council started to speak about the role of the laity and with their document on the laity, it was at the peak of religious life. It was at the peak of numbers that we had of consecrated people in the world. It was at the apex of the number of institutions that we had around the world. There was nothing dimming. We were in full bloom, full flower. So when the church started to speak about the role of the laity, it wasn't, oh, the religious are dying, therefore we need to get the laity to fill in their places. This is a very important point to underline, that the church's understanding of itself is that the laity are an important part and they're not filling gaps for us. So it's a conversion process from the universal call to holiness. We used to have initially the charism, well, the institution at the center, the religious, and then around it the different people who liked our charism, who liked us. And there's been the move now to take that religious congregation out and we put in the charism of the institute. So the charism of the institute is shared in communion by people with the different states of life that they have. So this is what's been happening in the church. And in the Oblate congregation, we find the echo of this. If we look at Rule 37 of our Constitutions and Rules, the charism of Saint Eugene de Mazenod is a gift of the Spirit to the church, and it radiates throughout the world. It doesn't say the Oblate charism, it says the charism of Saint Eugene de Mazenod. Lay people recognize that they are called to share in the charism according to their state of life, and to live it in ways that vary according to milieu and cultures. They share in the charism in a spirit of communion and reciprocity amongst themselves and with the oblates. In order to live more intensely the mission of evangelization according to the Oblate charism, some lay people gather in associations. So charism is at the center. As our constitutions describe us, the missionary oblates, as cooperators of the Savior in evangelization, everyone who shares in the charism of Eugene de Mazenod has that vocation to be cooperators of the Savior in evangelization. So then Father Lou Studer, our provincial, looked at all this and together with his council identified 8 ways, 8 expressions that we have of the Mazenodian family here in the United States province. The first one is the missionary oblates. Then we have the honorary oblates. There are about 26 of them, and they are around the country, and they are people who share fully in our oblate life. They are people who are being honored because they have been such strong participants in our oblate charism and in the mission of the congregation. Then we have a group known as the afiliados, oblate affiliates. They are in the West Coast at this moment, in Tijuana and in California, and they are young men generally who are wanting to become oblates, who are discerning an oblate vocation. And they meet once a month with the oblate community. Jesse Esqueda looks after them, with the time of sharing and deepening their knowledge and understanding of the charism. We are hoping now with the other vocations directors that all 4 of our vocations directors will start in the afiliados or the affiliates throughout the country. Then we have the oblate associates, where we have Jerry Furmanek as the director of the national office. And she has on her list 573 associates here in the US. Then we have the oblate employees who fit into this picture as well. And there's around 600 persons around the country. Now, some of them consciously participate in the charism. Others, they are employees because they need the work, they need the bread on the table. But in all cases, we have to say to them, even if they don't have a single idea of, I'm doing this for the Mazenodian charism, to say to them, your work that you are doing is important. Without your ministry, without your work, our mission would be impoverished. And Jerry Furmanek is the one who looks after the enrichment of the Oblate employees. Then you have the Oblate mission supporters. And the figure that is given by Billy Morrell is about 400,000 people. Now that covers a lot of people. It covers the MAMI office in Belleville. It covers the OMSI, the missions office down in San Antonio. It covers all the people who are involved in supporting us through funds and in many other ways. And that huge number is part of the number of people who respond, who receive our mailings that we send out regularly, and who respond to them and are supporting us in various ways. And that is a big umbrella concept as well, because we can put in there our friends, our family members, all those who support us in any way. And then we have the Oblate Partners, a group started by Artie Pingo, about 120 persons, who support the mission through their talents, through their time, and through their finances. These are people who are usually professional people or people who are a little bit wealthy and want to support the mission through time, talents, and money. And then we have the Oblate Youth. And this group is represented by David Munoz. Now, Oblate Youth is a bit of a difficult group because we don't really have Oblate Youth members around the country. We deal with youth in our parishes, in our confirmation programs, in our retreats, but can you really call them Oblate Youth? Not really. But the model that this group is taking is the model of Eugene de Mazenod, where he had up to 300 young guys whom he formed to be leaders, and that then they would go out and they would be yeast wherever they were meeting other young people. And that's the model then of the Oblate Youth, the formation of youth leaders. So that's the family, and I've got the words there, Oblate family, with the Oblates in the middle, and then around it all these groups that rotate. But in 1995 we had the canonization of St. Eugene, and immediately he became a universal saint for the universal church. And the charism of St. Eugene was the charism of the universal church. It didn't belong to us. We don't have copyright on St. Eugene. And this was illustrated recently when someone wrote to me to say he'd been going through the internet. His parents had got divorced. He was going through the internet looking for a saint who would understand his situation, some sort of a patron of broken families. And he came across Eugene de Mazenod. And he decided to write a book, a biography of St. Eugene. And he just wrote to me to ask for sources, for information. He didn't write to ask for permission to write about Eugene de Mazenod. In fact, his book has been published. There is no oblate permission, no nihil obstat or anything. It is a Christian, a member of the church, who liked this ecclesial charism and this person who belongs to the church, and therefore wrote a book about St. Eugene, which is rather good. It tells us, it illustrates what I'm saying. That at the center of our diagram then is not the Oblates of Mary Immaculate, but the charism of St. Eugene. And then in order to bring this idea to fruition, Father Lou has appointed a Mazenodian Family Committee that had its first meeting in January. And it has three key words. The Mazenodian Family Committee exists to unite, to clarify, and to plan. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. What is this committee all about? It exists at the service of the Mazenodian family. It represents all aspects of the life of the U.S. charismatic family. At this stage, we have 8 branches, but that's not written in stone, because there are other questions. Where do other groups, where do other people who are related to the charism, where do they fit in? So this is a work in progress. Our working model is the one with the 8. It could be many more. Also, this committee does not micromanage. It isn't there to get involved with each group and say, this is what you have to do. And then we want to focus on province-wide issues and programs. The members, each group has some representatives. The Oblate congregation representatives are Lou and his 2 vicars, and then David Munoz and myself, who are the coordinators of the committee. So, looking at the charism family then, what do we find? We find then, if we put in the charism in the middle, we find that the oblate relationship to the charism is pretty clear. The oblate associates, okay, they're associated with us, but through the formation that we're doing, they're understanding and loving St. Eugene and the charism of St. Eugene. So they can relate directly to that and not through us. The afiliados also, they are thinking about joining us, but they are learning about the charism, they are coming into relationships. So those 3 are pretty clear. The others then get a little bit more hazy. Oblate mission supporters, yes, they support the missions of the oblates. How do we connect them with the charism? Oblate partners, they are partners of the oblate missions. How do we get them more connected with the center? The oblate employees as well, the oblate youth and the honorary oblates. And so that's the situation as we have it now. The lines are not all very clear. And so the task of the Mazenodian Committee is to help each one of these groups to come into relationship with the charism, to understand their vocation in the charismatic family. The diagram that I have been using is a very nice one of everything is very, very neat. But in fact, it's more like the one on the other side, this polyhedron, where you have the charism at the center, but each group is at a different distance in a different place to that charism. Okay, so the work of the Mazenodian Family Committee. We've got two particular areas. One is to help the oblates to reflect on where do we see ourselves fitting into this picture. And that's why I'm going around to all the area meetings to do this presentation and to begin the process of getting us all to focus and interact with this. And then the second major step for us as a congregation will be the convocation in 2020. And then, how do the members of each group see themselves as fitting into this picture? So the journey ahead for each group is to reflect on the charism, their relationship to the charism, and where they fit into the charismatic family. I mentioned those 3 key words of why the committee exists: unite, clarify, plan. Let me conclude by saying a little bit about what we're aiming at there. To unite. First of all, mutual knowledge and cooperation. If we're a family, we need to know about the other members of the family. Those of us on the East Coast or in Texas, we've never heard of afiliados, for instance. Others have never heard of partners. So we need to learn from each other what each group is about and to learn to cooperate with each other. And then to have a united journey with a common annual theme. And here is a committee, and then with the approval of the council, we looked at what are we going to do with this theme? Because you have all sorts of themes floating around, and then the chapter comes out with other themes, and we should do the chapter themes. And we decided, no, let's get basic. Let's go to the absolute foundational themes, the foundational points of our charism and of our spirituality. Let's deepen those. And then we can apply them to the chapter themes and to all the other things that do come to us. And we will consciously bring in the chapter themes each year. And so we have opted that for 2019, the theme that every branch of the Mazenodian family will be invited to participate in is Jesus Christ, Savior and Evangelizer. That is the foundation. That is the basic thing from which everything else grows. And so what we are looking at, and there's a group of us working on getting material together. And I've been using the OST connections there to get some of the oblates at OST. And then last week I had a meeting with two of our women professors who are doing the lay ministry training, who are doing the theological evaluation, the theological thinking that the seminarians do. And together with them, we are working on having what we call, say, a treasure chest with various different themes and various different topics that can be used and material that can be used. So that each branch then will be able to take from it to have material for the year. So our annual retreats for the Oblates are on this theme. Dick Sudlick will be doing Jesus Christ, Savior and Evangelizer for our annual retreats. And then also the retreats that they will have at Leb Shomer will be on that same theme. Then we will have material available for the different houses, the different communities, for monthly day of recollections, should they so wish to use that material. And also for the Oblate Associates who meet once a month. There will be 12 months worth of information on this theme. And so that's one way then of uniting the Mazenodian family. Then the second idea is clarify. Help each group to understand their vocation. And it's interesting when I've been speaking to some of the associates about this, and I say, do you believe that you are called to be an associate? And some say, yes, I see that clearly. Others say, no, I never thought of it. You know, I like the Oblates. I want to be involved with the Oblates. So it's that whole journey of saying, this is the way we respond to our vocation as baptized people. And then we also want to, as part of the clarification, we want to have a province directory. A directory then for each of these 8 branches, but then an overall directory for the province to keep it all together. And we hope to promulgate that at our convocation in 2020. And then thirdly, to plan. We're planning a vocations congress at the end of January, where we're going to have representatives of each of these branches in the United States, plus we have invited the provincials of Canada because we are one region, and some representatives of Canada in the lay sphere, the various associate groups that they have. And we will spend 3 days in San Antonio looking at what is the vocation of a lay person in a charism that has come through a religious congregation. What does that mean? And we're going to have 2 theologians to help us to reflect, plus we will be listening to the experience of people. We'll have more information on that in another moment. Plan animation material each year for all the members of the charismatic family. Convocation participation. What we're looking at in 2020 is a convocation of the Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate, but then the Thursday is going to be the convocation of the Mazenodian family. And the National Assembly of the Associates will be happening at the same time in the same area. So that Thursday we're going to gather together as a Mazenodian family to reflect together and to celebrate our being family. So that's in 2020. And then finally the other planning point is to help us as a Mazenodian family to respond to issues in the United States. We are in difficult times as church, we are in difficult times as a country. Can we as a united Mazenodian family help one another, to see light, to cope, to strengthen one another, and to learn from one another. So that's what the Mazenodian family concept is all about.